Hey, everybody, welcome to Making Sense of It All series, professional at anything but golf. As always, with me in this series is my co-host, Wes Altus. He's the director of instruction over at Top Golf here in Jacksonville, Florida. Wes, thanks for joining me.
As always, pleasure to be here, my man.
And our guest today is Dawn Woodard. She is the CEO and president of a company called Judgment Matters. Dawn, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
I'm excited about this. So before we even jump into anything, I always like to tell people, tell my audience at a high level, what is it that you do?
So I work with people basically using an assessment that looks at what you value. If we know what your natural tendencies are, what matters, that's driving your decision making, so then we can apply that into any setting. I work with a lot of athletes and some professionals within the working world, but mainly say 80% of my business is golfers. And we're using that to basically make better decisions on the golf course, strategy-wise, understand yourself better, how you're going to perform, how to manage that so that you can be better and get better results at the end of the day.
Awesome. I think a lot of people are going to be really familiar with things like a disc profile or like strength finders, things like that businesses a lot of times will incorporate. Is it similar to that or is it different? What is it like, just so that they kind of frame it correctly in their mind?
So the main difference is things that you just mentioned, Myers-Briggs, disc profiles, things like that. They all come out of the field of psychology. And so you see a lot of like personality traits and things like that give you a tremendous look into people, how they're going to respond and do in certain situations. The assessment that I use is called the Judgment Index. It comes actually out of the field of philosophy because it's values-based, it's behavioral-based. So when you take that assessment, you've got two lists really that you're just ranking things. There are no right or wrong. So it's a little different. You don't get asked the same question 15 different times. Things like that. It's just a matter of looking at what do you value, and then it really gives us some insight into how you're going to do with making decisions across the board.
Excellent. So full disclosure for my audience, as part of this, I actually took the Judgment Index myself. You and I went through my results. I also shared my results with Wes, just because Wes knows me as a golfer. He knows me as a person a bit. And tell Dawn and tell the audience what you thought of the results, just on the surface.
Couldn't have described you any better as a golfer.
Even if I don't want to admit it myself, he's telling you.
It's like, oh my God, we've played a match together in our 10 cup, and I'm like, yeah, this is Jesse to a T. So it was eye opening, and it just shows you. It'll actually give Jesse a roadmap on how to handle adverse situations going in the future, not only in golf but in life. So it really like made me smile and laugh, like how accurate it was.
So there you go, Don. There's a little bit of a testimonial right off the bat.
I hear people all the time, they ask me, how did this tell you this? Like, how did you get all of that from me ranking two lists of statements? So I do kind of get that response a lot.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, before we dive in head first here, I want to kind of pull it back because I find it fascinating, people's origin stories, their why stories. What on earth made you decide to do this? Not just as a business, but your passion, what you do. I mean, this is kind of what you're centered around as far as your career and what you're focused on.
So as everything, it's kind of grown over the past 13 years into what it is today. But, when I played golf at Furman, after being just an all-around athlete, basketball was first love, all of those kind of things, but decided I would full scholarship, played golf at Furman, played all 4 years, but didn't really want to play golf professionally. I didn't want the lifestyle, 30 weeks out of the year of traveling. Got married, had kids, I taught school, was a teacher until my kids were born, stayed home and with them, and was just basically full-time mom and loved every bit of that. And as they started getting a little bit older and needed less and less from me, well, I can't play but so much golf, and I was still traveling and still competing at the higher amateur level. And it was ironic. My husband actually was using this assessment in the business world where they work and with doing some training and development of employees. And I was his guinea pig for when he went through the training to use the assessment. And when I took it, it kind of blew me away. I was kind of like, wow, how did that's actually very insightful. And my wheels started spinning with, this would be really helpful, like with college coaches and being able to shorten the learning curve with the kids that are on their teams, or the relationship between caddies and players on the golf course, or between instructors and players. So those were my first thoughts. And so when I went and reached out to them about how to do this, it's kind of new. It hadn't been done a lot. They didn't have any golf reports and things. So I kind of had to build it kind of from the ground up with the reports. And they were awesome over at Judgment Index, and they've been such a great resource and helped. And it's been definitely a two-way street with, I've needed them for all of the assessments and things like that. And they've let me run with it with the golf. So then reaching out to my connections of college coaches and people that I play golf with at a higher level with, do you see the benefit in this? How, like letting them see how it's used. And it took off mainly at first just within the college side,
Sure.
because that's really all I was trying to do. And then over time, then the referrals or the individuals that had come across it who wanted to use it just personally day to day with their, and so now it's encompasses juniors and colleges and pros. And like I said, even the referrals from, they cross my path with golf, but they've got a friend who's in a different sport, or they own a business and they wanted to know something about how can we do something with the organization. So it's definitely grown into what it is today, but it started with just as a player, me realizing there's so much benefit. You can spend hours and hours and hours practicing, but especially as adults, how do we shorten that curve, that learning curve? How do we amplify everything essentially, for myself as a mom, I wanted to use it also to get better as a player, but I'm not going to go and practice 20 hours a week anymore like I did in college, but I still want to compete at a really high level. So I started to understand, wait, if I can do this for myself, I can help other people do it. And it just really became pretty passionate when you start seeing the impact it was making. And so then I stuck with it and turned it into a business.
I think it's amazing. And I think that there's applications at every level of the game. And like you said, outside of the game, it's one of the things, this whole series that we kind of have set up is really focused on that 30, 40 or 50 something year old professional that has either entered the game or they played a little bit when they were younger, but they use it for recreation. They use it for a little bit of competitive, to fuel their competitive fire, but also they use it for business and they use it for all sorts of things as far as when it comes with client interactions. It was interesting to me because I really do classify myself as that type of golfer. I was a competitive athlete when I was younger and in baseball, but golf came later in life. And golf was one of those things to where, I made a joke. I wasn't really joking when I said it to you, like when we were talking the other day, but I said, hey, sticking a ball, this has got to be a really simple sport. I'll be on the Champions Tour by the time I'm 50, because I was because I thought so highly of my hand-eye coordination. I learned very quickly that wasn't the case. And I see you trying to hold back the laugh right now. So anyways, but the point when I saw this, when I went through this test, one of the first things that I did, I kicked it over to Wes and I said, you know what? I said, this is awesome because it really does it to me. It's like if somebody showed me this when I first picked up the game, rather than toiling at it for 15 years or longer, I don't want to date myself too much, but like if somebody pointed this out, said, okay, this is the beginning of your blueprint of how to learn this game, or the best way for you to learn this game, it's invaluable. I mean, you're saving hours, you're saving days, months, years potentially, and so many people going backwards and forwards in the game. And I'll shut up because I'm kind of the amateur on the call here. But I mean, Wes, I'll even throw it out to you. Like when you see this, how valuable is this to you as an instructor, as somebody who's looking to try to help somebody? When you see something like that, how valuable is it?
Yeah, I mean, this is literally invaluable information because it helps me cater my teaching style to theirs. Because usually in the first lesson, you're trying to figure out the person in front of you. Their career can tell you a lot about. Engineers usually like to be real technical and want to know all the ins and outs and everything. So knowing their career helps, but having something like this, and I can look at it and be like, okay, we can start developing out a plan that will meet their personality. And, if you get that personality wrong kind of in the beginning, you're not going to have the trust as much. But that's kind of the art of coaching, is figuring out that person in front of you and again, having something like this at your disposal is crazy. Like, I think it should be one of those things, if someone comes in for a first time on a lesson, having something like this instead of, you know, how many times do you practice a week or anything like that, this is more valuable than anything I could ever kind of add. So I think this is something to really, for instructors and also golfers, to look into something like this, and not only for yourself, but for the person that's going to help you develop your game.
So,
Great cheat
Donna,
sheet. It's a great cheat
absolutely.
sheet.
Yes.
I wish I had
Perfect.
it in high school for algebra.
Well, that actually leads me to kind of a question here is, I know you work with some junior players with Coach Mo and everything. When you put them through something like this, and obviously they mature out into college, do you ever see this kind of change a little bit with the junior players going from, let's say, the, elite juniors, and then they start getting into college? Are you starting to see them change a little bit? Does it stay pretty much the same? Is it all over the board?
So the assessment you guys saw yesterday, it has sort of the what you do side, and then it has the who you are. So you kind of have a work side and a self side.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see sort of the self side change, but that's going to change even in adults over, a couple of years when there's more stress, things going on. We're going to see that roller coaster with the self side, a little bit. But the first of that, what we do side and that piece, your values are pretty set. By the time somebody's early teenager, they're sort of, that's who they are, and what they value. So what we see as they grow is, it's got to be big things in life that happen that would really change your value. If it doesn't change the way you see things and what's really important to you, then those scores will stay the same. Like, I do a lot with, say someone comes in college as a freshman, and then a lot of times as a senior, they'll take it again.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see a little shift sometimes, but most of the time those results, the top half of the score sheet looks almost identical. Sometimes the numbers are still exactly the same, because at the end of the day, it takes a lot to change what we value.
Yep.
If a kid is younger, like, and we don't go really, you got to be pretty mature, 12, 13, somewhere in that range before I would do, like, otherwise I can start helping and working with someone, but the assessments, at that point, we're just going to see what their parents' values are. They haven't really shaped their own. But once they shape their own, this is not something that you have to take often. It's once we have those pieces, they're in place.
That's awesome. That's great information to know.
So for yourself, I'm just, you talked about your husband actually introducing this concept to you through work, and then you kind of refined it for golf. Going through all of this, is it something that affected your personal golf game?
Oh, absolutely. Totally. And I think even with then working with players on their own stuff gives you some, when it's much easier to see something in someone else's game and someone else's life than it is to see it in your own. But it's definitely, it explains a lot at the end of the day. We're not trying to change any, we don't really want to change anyone, because there's strengths and pros and cons to everything. There's no better or worse way to be when we go through and we start to see, these possible things, like whether they value people or task or the big picture, or if they're realistic or idea. These are things I went through with you yesterday, and there's a pro and con to both sides of everything, but it gives you the why. So when I see something happening in my game, or for example, I used to be a horrible match play player, and as a USGA competitor, I was medalist several times in some really big tournaments and be the number one seed. And I'd get to match play and I'd really struggle. But I knew, why am I struggling? Well, I'm a very intrinsic player who is going to have a lot of ties to the I knew I do better when I can talk to the players. And, like, you start putting pieces together and you actually realize this is kind of what's causing some of my issues. So instead of thinking I needed to go work on this or I needed to go work on that, I just needed to be more aware of what was actually happening and put something in place to actually manage that as it was going on. It wasn't a bad thing at all that it was happening. I just didn't know how to manage it. So and so it's definitely helped me. It's given me perspective. But at the end of the day, I think it's the self-awareness. It's the building the confidence in myself versus just in my golf game. So many people start out and they think, well, my game's not any good and I've got to play better to be able to be more confident in my game. It's not there. Then they're pretty good at practice, but then they start to go to compete and then they don't understand how, like, that's a whole different ball game and they're afraid to do it. Well, what it does, it's we build confidence in that player, and that player really understands who they are and what their tendencies are. Well, now we can throw anything at them and they have much more of that I've got this attitude. They don't have to have all the answers. So it's okay to go try. They're not as frustrated when things aren't going well, or when they go see an instructor and they work on something and they don't feel like, now they've got those answers. And I think that's what I was also able to do. It helped me with whether I was communicating with caddies. Even my husband caddied for me some, and he's a PhD ceramic engineer who's very task dominant, and I'm the exact opposite of all of that. We don't play golf the same way. We don't consider the same things. And we used to have some really kind of heated moments on the golf course between the two of us, and just, he pulled for me and was so supportive, and he really wanted it for me. But he also didn't realize that he was creating so much internal doubt for myself, because I didn't know, do I listen to what he's saying or do I know what I need to do? And I didn't really want to voice it because I knew he really knew my game and he knows all those things. And I kind of found myself in a no-win situation a lot of times, and I didn't understand why. Well, now I totally understand why, and it just opens the lines of communication and things are a lot more productive.
I think that's awesome. I think it's just like in situations where parents are, trying to communicate with a child, or like you said, spouses communicating with spouses, a boss trying to communicate with their employees. A lot of the times, if you're trying to just have that direct conversation, it's very difficult. But when you can point at a report, or when you can point at something and you're saying, hey, it's not me saying this to you, this is the data, or this is the report talking to you, not me. It makes it hard to argue with a piece of paper versus arguing with a person. And so it forces that person to maybe they won't accept it, but it does at least force them to look at it as factual data and not as just somebody's opinion.
Right. You don't have to relate to it. You don't have to be able to fully understand it, but you've got to be able to acknowledge that that is still there. And even if it's just to simply agree to disagree, at least you now know why. And so it takes a lot of that frustration out of the equation.
Awesome. So let's switch gears a little bit to to our audience. Like, when people are hearing this, if it's striking somebody, if it's catching their interest and they're wondering, okay, is this something that I do once? Is this something that is this something that I work with, Dawn, over a period of time? What does that look like? What are the options that people have when they're kind of entering your program?
So everything is very individualized,
Okay.
And so the thing that I would encourage people, anyone who's even remotely considering, hey, this might be something that would help me, we can give them ways to reach out directly to me, through email. I get back with them, because if they're looking to say, just have that report that you put in Wes's hand yesterday, where all he did was read the report, even if he had never talked to me, Wes, as an instructor, or you read that report, you get enough from just that to be able to help someone. You never even have to have a conversation with him, but there's enough information in there that you gain something. But Jesse, the way you did it was you got your report, but then you had a call with me where I really, over that hour, really went into a lot of depth with that, gave you ideas on sort of, these are some starting points, go in this direction, use these things. But then I also have people who take that step and then they do that, but they say, this is awesome, but I can't really apply this on my own. So now I need you to sort of month by month work with me. What are the things that are going to do? Because that report, it really defines your comfort zone. It really says, these are things that your natural tendencies. These are things that are going to help you be more comfortable. You're going to get a lot out of that as long as you're operating in these areas. But if you want to get better, we got to push you out of that comfort zone. But if we just randomly start pushing, there's going to be a lot of resistance from most people. Well, I don't like that, and that doesn't work for me, and that's making me worse, or this is not helping. Well, when we know the comfort zone, and I know that I have that cheat sheet now, I know how to push you out of it in a constructive way. So whether that's giving you things to do on the golf course, sometimes it involves doing some journaling. Sometimes it involves, if you're trying to play tournaments or you just want to be your regular, I go play golf 5 days a week for enjoyment, and I'm not having much enjoyment anymore. If you want some things where I can help, then there's that aspect of it too. So, we can take this and apply it just at the very basic. You take this, I may never even speak to you, but you get something from me, or we have some conversation, or we really start to be more in depth.
So it sounds like there's something for everybody. Wes, is there any questions that you have, like from your perspective when it comes to that?
No, I think what she said there, even if you are going out and having, you're a casual golfer and you're just wanting to go have fun, don't let, the emotions of not understanding why you react to things the way you do, and have like that blueprint in front of you, like, hey, maybe I do need to let off steam for the first 20 seconds after I hit a bad shot, or take a sip of beer, and then I can move on. I love it comes to the individual. And Justin and I kind of spoke about this too, the way John Rahm and Dustin Johnson handle a good or bad shot are completely different ends of the spectrum. So, and I believe you would never take that fire out of John Rahm, because he wouldn't be John Rahm before, like you kind of alluded to earlier. So I love how this can apply to every single golfer that's out there. So I love this. This is great.
You mean don't throw my driver in the trash can after a bad tee shot?
I mean, if you want to pay for another one, that's on you. If that makes you feel better and get over the shot, yeah, go for it. I know where you can buy some from.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your athletic career. You really had no plans on being a college golfer in the beginning. You wanted to be a basketball player, didn't you?
Basketball's always been my first love, but as an athlete, growing up in a small town, and we had no stoplights, just, next town over to go. I grew up playing with the guys. I had one brother that was 20 months younger. So, I was the catcher on a baseball team growing up. I played soccer. If it had a ball and it was in town, like that's just what we did. I played some sport at the rec all the time with the guys from the time I was 6 and was old enough to do it all the way up. Well, basketball tended to be the one sport that just was probably the easiest thing I've ever done. It was second nature, never felt any pressure. I'm the one that wanted the ball at the end of the game. Never, we won state championship. I was coming out of high school, was recruited to play basketball. Could write my ticket to do wherever.
Yeah.
Player of the year for the state, won state championship, loved basketball. But I really went from one season to the other. So basketball was just, it was back when we didn't do things year round.
Right.
So I played basketball during basketball season. I played volleyball during volleyball season. I played golf during the summer, but that involved the parents dropping us off at the little country club in town, where as long as you could pass your swim test, you could get dropped off that morning. I saw Miss Kathy at the bar to get my cheeseburger and put it on the tab, and Mr. Steve in the shop, and they had the camps and all that. So I got pretty good at golf, but it was just, I did that during the summers.
Right.
And not until I was even a junior, late in my years, that I even ever really played golf in tournaments. So, but basketball was always good. I thought I would play college basketball. Came to Furman after my junior year in high school for just regular summer golf camps, where my parents were like, all right, well, let's just do a golf camp this summer.
Sure.
Mick Potter was the coach at Furman then. And he, he's like, well, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go to school? And I was like, well, I'm going to go to North Carolina, and he's like, what do you like? He's thinking I'm going to go for golf, for like, he's behind, and like, how did I not know about you or whatever? And he's like, what? And I'm like, I'm going to play basketball. And he's like, just, head spinning for, and so he's like, well, you're really good at golf. I'd love, like, literally within no time, he'd made an offer for me to full scholarship to play golf at Furman. And up until that point, it had never crossed my mind that I would play golf.
Were your parents
was the only recruiting trip I took was to Furman for golf. Had every opportunity to do whatever for basketball. And I just sort of, that was back before like WNBA. And it was just, I was just going to play a sport in college. It was going to be a free education and I loved it. And so I kind of fell in love with Furman. I love the idea of the small, close group, loved Mick, thought, you know what? I'm up for the, like I can do this. So I came to Furman and I played golf, but basketball I coach my kids in basketball. If I walk by, if you give me a basketball right now and I got to go down the street to give it to someone, I'm going to dribble it the whole way. A lot of times, even when I'm out running or doing things like in my head, I'm dribbling. I think I'm still, 16 on a basketball court and can do all the things that in my head I can still do. Physically, I can't, but I think I can. And so I was just the athlete at the end of the day.
Were your parents shocked though, or were the people around you shocked when you said, "Nope, I'm not playing basketball in college. I'm going to play golf"? Or was it just like, "Hey, go have fun, do what you want to do"?
They knew I played, but everyone assumed. I mean, I was, I was in the newspaper every week for basketball. All over everywhere. Everyone knew me for basketball.
Yeah.
So when I said I'm going to go play golf, being from a small town, I mean, you're raised by the entire village. Everyone knows everyone. So it wasn't that people didn't realize I was a good golfer, but I mean, it's a small town. Not a lot of people even played golf. So They don't fully understand that. And it's kind of like, well, what do you mean you're going to play golf in college? Or they didn't fully grasp all of that. And I had a hard time at first because I think everyone expected me to play basketball. So for me, like, I feel like that was one of the very first times where I made the decision to play golf. I now know like that had to have been a huge problem. I value what my inner circle people think. I don't want to let people down. I do, really. And so I'm sure that hasn't changed. I'm sure it was the same way when I was 17 or 18.
Right.
And it was kind of a big risk, but I also I really feel like Furman is a second home and I'm going to be really comfortable and I know I can be successful in that setting. And to the point also, I felt like I know I'm good at basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go see how good I can be at golf. Like it was I knew I was good enough, but then I got continually better. And actually I'm over the years, I mean, Mick would probably tell you I'm as good or better now, having just turned 50, as I was in college, because my game continually got better, but you just learn so many things along the way and you start learning how to use those things. You just learn you can do this game forever. I don't regret it, but absolutely basketball is still first love.
Well, I'd argue that you made the right choice.
I do not, and I tell people are surprised sometimes when I tell them I don't love golf. I like it, but I like that I'm good at it. And I also like the social aspect, the fact that I travel and can still compete and I have friends all over the world because of it. My connections, I've turned it into a business. Like there are a lot of things about golf. Golf is a great vehicle for me.
No doubt.
That opened the doors to the things that I loved, but I never truly, and to this day, I just don't love golf.
Mm-hmm. Wes, you kind of had a similar track. You played volleyball through college, yes, and then you ended up in the golf business as well.
Yeah, it was one of those things where intention was I wasn't recruited out of high school, but to try and walk on somewhere and started playing. I was playing volleyball all through high school too, and we were actually in intramurals, and some guys walked up to me like, "Why are you not on the volleyball team?" I'm like, "Well, let me know what to do." And so we kind of that's how my volleyball career in college went. So we started we had kind of a club team at UNF, and UNF ended up sponsoring us to travel all over the Southeast and compete. So it wasn't a NCAA sponsorship, but the school did, and we were competitive. And yeah, it's crazy how I was like, yeah, volleyball sounds fun right now, and just went down that avenue, and then end up getting a summer job, and I was actually at Marsh Landing, and I'm like, this is kind of fun. I want to do this, and so that's how my golf kind of career, as far as wanted to be a career, kind of started, was out just being a cart boy at Marsh Landing and just loved the atmosphere of it. And I was always wanting to know why I never got like elite in my golf game, because there's always different instruction going on. And I was like, I just don't have the answers. No one's giving me the right answer. And so that took me down on the journey of the coaching side, and going through that journey makes me appreciate what others are trying to do, because it's not easy, and it's gotta be a full-time career, I think, for most. It can't be a dual career anymore. If you're going to be a golf instructor, you're a golf instructor. You're not I work inside the shop for 40 hours and then I teach for 10. It's not quite, if you want to kind of really be at the top of the game here.
I think everybody's, and I guess that's the thing, that golf it's infectious. People enjoy it. And I think that's kind of, again, one of the big purposes of why we're doing this show is because you have people who weren't introduced to it as kids, maybe, or who took it up late in life, or they use it for other purposes, but the game's enjoyable. People have a lot of fun around it. It's people fall in love with it. People desire to be better at it. And so I hope through this whole thing that we're giving people some, whether those answers are mental, if they're through equipment, if they're through, just instruction, whatever it is, that we're helping them enjoy the game more. We're helping them kind of get to know, just if it sparks that one idea that says, this might be what's going to do it for me. Dawn, I hope that you're that for a lot of people who are listening today. And I really do. I want to thank you for being on the show. Again, if people are interested, if people are hooked by this, they want to learn more. They say, this is something that I would like to explore for myself. What's the best way for somebody to get a hold of you? What's that one way that you'd like people to connect with you?
So the easiest would be to shoot me an email at dawn.woodard@me.com.
Okay. We'll make sure that is also listed below this, as far as wherever we post it. That way people have that access. We'll make sure that everybody has your contact information.
Yeah. I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, it's the main thing is if they reach out to me, then we can get something. If I kind of had said earlier, I feel like my job is to help you manage your human. The emotions, the frustrations, the things that go on in our day-to-day lives. So many people that start late, this audience that you're speaking of, they want to get out there. If you can get your human out of the way, then you're going to be much more successful trying to do the things that you want to do. And even if you're not as successful as you want to be, it's definitely going to make it less frustrating trying. And so I feel like that's the biggest thing for me is if someone feels like there's any of that, having that little cheat sheet, they can apply it in any direction, reach out and let me see what I can do to help them.
That is something that will stick with me probably for the rest of my life. Thank you very much, Dawn. I appreciate it. And I hope that we can have you back on the show here again when we have other different and varied topics to talk about, to where you would be willing to lend your expertise.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you guys having me on. It's been fun being a part of this process.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, Dawn.
Thanks, Wes.